Hello, everybody. A big welcome to everybody who's joined this webinar. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all the participants to this webinar, which we've called Welcome to Kickstart 2024, How to Fund Your Data and AI Strategy for Responsible Value Creation. I'm delighted to introduce Nicholas, who is the CEO and founder of UE, who has many years experience working on business transformation and data initiatives. Welcome, Nicholas.
Thanks, Rob. Nice to have you today.
Thank you. I'm Rob Howes. I'm your host today. I've spent the last 6 years at Calibra working on data governance and quality programs. I'm also the founder of the Big Data and Analytics Group on LinkedIn with over 500,000 members. So in this webinar, we are going to be sharing lots of valuable insights and practical approaches to how to define and manage your data and AI strategy, covering non-technical aspects. I know a lot of people talk about the technical aspects. We're going to go more on the business end of this argument. Some of the key outcomes will be how to maximize the impact, how to control the risks associated with that, and most importantly, how to build the right narrative and story to secure additional funding. This session is supposed to be very interactive. We're asking for everyone to jump in with questions, jump in with observations, add your insights as we are all on this learning journey. So quickly to summarize for the agenda today, we are going to be sharing some highlights from the 2023 Data and AI Value Management Survey. If you want the full survey, we can send that to you. So please do request that through the chat. Just type in survey or message me on LinkedIn. Next, we're going to be talking about some of the key problem statements that we're seeing in the market directly from the community. Next, we're going to be talking about some strategies and tactics on how to align for success. A quick summary on how does UE help data and AI leaders in this context. Then we'll talk about some key takeaways and then we'll wrap up. We've allowed an hour for this session. So let's make sure we get the most out of this value for you. Next slide. So, Nicola, do you want to run us through, from your perspective, what are the most interesting highlights from the survey that you received back from the segment? I can't actually hear you, Nicola. But...
Sorry. Yeah. So. Yeah, we ran the survey last year with along with amongst data leaders, CDOs, AI leaders, etc. So it's really interesting. So happy to share today the first of those results, and more are going to come later on. So if anyone is interested to getting the results of the survey, please drop a note in comments because we'll make sure to send that to you when it's fully ready. The first question we asked was around budget, and that's always an interesting one because that's the question is how much do you have to achieve that data and AI transformation, and we see that it's almost a fair split between those who have an increased budget, so a large share of them have either more budget or significantly more budget to spend in 24. And like a third of them have none, but we see some challenge with some data leaders with having reduced budget. So usually, so that raises additional question about why is that? Because we all know. So is it a failure to acknowledge? Is it because the organization itself is under pressure? So many things behind that. But it's interesting to see those kind of mixed challenges in terms of where different organizations are and how strategically they think about data and AI. So that's the first thing. To dig a bit into that, we looked into like what are the top priorities from data leaders. So those priorities go are very kind of diverse. We see that most of them, what's very interesting is that there's no real challenge about purely technical capabilities, things that are blockers. And you see that if there are some, they would be in the 8% here. And maybe in the ability to deploy in production, but we know that the ability to deploy in production is usually not so much of a purely technical challenge, but also some one about changing business processes, changing workflows, and let's say organizational ones. So what's interesting behind those numbers is two things. One is that it's actually pretty broad, those challenges. So if we see we don't have the one that's taking 90% and the rest being low. So we see that there's probably a huge prioritization challenge behind that. What should I go? How should I manage those different priorities? So that's one. And the other one is we see that let's say, on one hand, data quality remains a big challenge. We're going to talk about that later, how to tackle that, because it remains a big challenge. But how much progress is actually being done is always a question. And the rest are a lot about organizational and human changes, about improving skills and data culture, improving collaboration element across silos, improving demand management, et cetera, et cetera. So that's also a big part of how do you engage the organization and how do you build a successful program. And obviously around that, the question of how do you get budget for all of that, and question about value or about risk and so on. The third question we ask, and again, that's one of the highlights, is but then how do you track that you are actually delivering value and succeeding with your transformation? And here we see that the maturity is still quite low across the organization we've met. And I would offer that it's probably even biased that the share of people doing it systematically is much higher than what it is across the industry. So because of the people we tend to talk to who are pretty let's say a bit more mature than most of them in the organization. So but what we see is that one is a almost surprising one is the share of people who do nothing, like they don't care at all about value. So that's probably a big challenge for them over time, and they're probably going to be challenged at some point on how are they delivering value for the organization and what's coming afterwards. And the rest of it are doing it in a very ad hoc way, saying, yeah, some people do it, or we do it some initiative, or some team do it, and so on. But then at the end, coming back to the previous challenges, the question is, how do you prioritize work if you don't even know how you're delivering things, and if you're putting your investment at the right place?
So Nicolas, basically what we're saying here is that over 80% of the survey participants are saying that they are either not tracking or they're doing it in a very tactical or ad hoc way in silos rather than systematically across the enterprise.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so is it safe to assume that there's a correlation between that fact and the fact that CDOs have a bit of a rotation of 2 years in role before they move on to the next company?
Yes, most probably because at some point, it means you put a lot of things in motion, you put a lot of energy in delivering things, but if you don't track value and if you don't convey that value or even care about it, then at some point it creates changes. There was an interesting quote. I struggled to find the study back, but something along the line that 90% of data analytics leaders believe that they deliver value to the organization. I'm using believe. And when you survey business leaders, 90% of them believe the contrary, that it's not bringing. And that kind of a difference is always a bit striking, because it's really how that's that kind of rift.
Yeah, just my own kind of personal perspective on this is having worked in the last sort of few years with the large enterprises on these programs is that there's been certainly 4 or 5 years ago, and it's less so now, there's been very much a focus around technical delivery. So technical delivery of tools, of capabilities, build it and they will come. I need to have a data dictionary or a BI. And really, there's, if you think about Simon Sinek and his why question, I don't think enough people are asking these questions. So why is it important? How does this help our organization? So, but I do see that shift in the last 2 years. More and more people are focused on this, which is heading in the right direction.
Yeah, it definitely we see that shift, and that again that progress toward really asking that question about why we do things, and then did we ask that. And actually that leads to the last highlight we wanted to share today is how do people actually do that? When they do, obviously, when do they track value? And that was an interesting one, because then we see that most of the time people try to do it at the beginning, saying, okay, how to build some kind of story to get budget. But then the share of people who actually track that afterwards and say, did we deliver any of the promises we made, is very low. And actually it's not even a split of that, across those three different things at end, every 6 months and so on, is that most of the people who do it every month actually also do it here and also at the end. So it means that basically not more than 33% ever ask themselves the question about the value afterwards. So that's a big one. And again, reporting on that, not only asking the why, but also then making sure that it's moving on the right direction and it's delivering the right value.
I guess this is important. If you start your strategy in the January and you have a 3-year strategy, things can change on that journey. So the question then becomes, how often do you need to monitor this to right size or switch or pivot to make sure that you're delivering value constantly?
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
have you seen examples can you share some examples which might necessitate a shift or a pivot? Or
there are many cases. I mean, the two latest one I have in mind were if we take 23, Gen AI popped up in the world, some real new paradigm shift, and it had a lot of impact on the pressure from the business, on the demands, on the ideas of what we can do, how fast we can do it, and so on. So if the idea of how fast can we shift things and move toward that is really important, to show that you can quickly embrace this kind of paradigm shift. And this one is on technology, but over the last few years we've also seen a lot of shift coming from, I would say, the ecosystem, political or economical things. So COVID has been a big one. So many companies had spent months building data and AI strategy, and then the day of the lockdowns, everything fell apart, and they had to rethink everything in terms of their adjustments, and or stop everything, depending on the company. But also you can have the war in Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East. I mean, so many things are happening. So depending on your industry, and that there are those kind of shifts all the time. And so it's not like it's something that might happen. It's something that will happen. And so
expect the unexpected.
Exactly.
You're not necessarily going to have a war or a pandemic every few weeks, but there's certainly going to be, I guess, other activities like M&A. So if you're making an acquisition, the organization may pivot towards that and say, let's focus on that and bring it into the mothership. Let's align all our systems, so that sort of then overtakes some of the other initiatives. So I guess the point we're making here is that it's important to do continuous monitoring of the value management process on all of your data and AI initiatives, so you can actually react to the changing landscape.
Yeah.
Good. So these are just the highlights from the survey. There's obviously a lot more content, which we're obviously open to sharing. Very useful stuff. Can we now that we've sort of set the scene with some of these observations, can you maybe highlight some of the problem statements that you're seeing?
Yeah, so and I like to, the next one was to take a step back and see what analysts have been saying. So I like that quote. I like it. I mean, it's an interesting one from Gartner from 2 years ago, where when they surveyed in their annual CDO survey, they found out that CDOs or organizations who prioritize enhancing data quality, reliability, and access actually have a reduced likelihood of delivering value by 40%, which is significant. So that that quote is often, when I share it, often surprising for data leaders and for especially people in the data governance space, because everyone knows that data quality is a major thing, and we saw that in the survey before. Everyone is concerned about that, and it's a challenge. But the point here, and it's very much what you were saying before, is that if you look at that as a bottom-up exercise, investing just on boiling the ocean with data quality, reliability, and access, the chance that you do it at the right place with the right level of expectation is actually pretty low. So the imperative here is to say, it's not a goal in itself. It's a mean to achieve goals. And so what you need to start what you were saying, start with a why, and then look at what you need to achieve those objectives, those business objectives, and then link that back to, okay, then I need to source that data. I need to invest on data quality because I know also what it will mean to succeed there. So you have that ability also to measure success. And
so the priority should be whatever the executive score or business scorecard is, whether it's revenue, profits, customer experience. Those are the things that they should be focusing, not the data management capability specifically.
Yeah, not necessarily that they shouldn't be focusing on that, but it's not a goal in itself. That's really important thing. It's a critical investment, but it remains a mean to achieve a why, and that's the thing that everyone needs to be hammered with and really focusing strongly on. And even more because when we look at I looked at the latest Gartner predictions for data programs and practices, and they're actually pretty bad, in the sense that so in December 23, Gartner predicts that by 27, 80% of data governance initiative will fail. That's a pretty strong statement saying, yeah, whatever you're doing, you're doing it wrong because it's going to fail. And it's going to fail because it's not built, it's not aligned with value delivery, it's not aligned with how people are going to use it, and so on, and it's built way too much from bottom up. But if we move further, they also say that 75% of basically data digital analytics products will be made redundant or shut down. And so the same way, it means now on top of governance, we build, not on top, but we build data products. But the same if you build them from a bottom up and not really from a client-centric way of building products and so on, they're not going to be to be used, and as such they're going to be made redundant. And obviously the consequence of that is that then 60% of the organization are going to fail to realize the values they anticipate from the use cases. So again, all in all of that is a bad outlook, so that for me it's really a scary one. So it's like an imperative. When you look at that, there's something wrong and you need to do something about it urgently.
So we've got a long way to go in terms of being, data mature or data driven as enterprises. Does this surprise you, some of these results or some of these predictions?
Actually not. I mean, they sadden me in a way, but they don't surprise me because I've been, again, I've been working in IT for a long time and in data, and I sometimes refer that as the curse of technical teams, because you're so much focused on delivering your capability, and like it's the saying, like, we build it and they will come, and we see that as almost a never-ending story about repeating the same patterns, like let's build a data lake and then it will solve the problem. Let's build the best data governance initiative and then it will solve all our problems. And it's always about, it's not wrong solutions, but they are not built to solve concrete problems. So then you need to shift the thinking and say, we know we need those capabilities, but how do we build a plan to make sure that they're delivering value? Yeah.
Well, it's clearly not an easy problem to solve, and it's going to take a while before we get there. So really eye-catching problem statements. What can we do to make it easier?
Yeah, so for me, the main starting point is always you if you want to go anywhere, you need a good strategy. And so the main let's say takeaway are what is a good strategy and what are the key ingredients you need to put in there to set up your strategy for success in a way. So that's a really important thing. So basically what I've found is six key topics today that are part of the good strategy. So the first one, and it's something that is missing a lot, is that you have to think about having one strategy for data and analytics and AI together. Too often I've seen, one data strategy on one hand and an AI strategy on the other hand, and it's poorly articulated or not articulated. And at the end, again, a data strategy which is not embedded into how you're going to use it and what you're actually going to make it out of that is a challenge. So the first thing is to think about it as not in silos, but as a whole. How we're going to deliver value with data, and that includes analytics and AI and so on. So that's the first one, which is important. The second one, we've mentioned that already, is that notion of it has to be aligned. So whatever you define in that strategy needs to be linked to strategic business objectives, but also to ethical business objectives, or ethical objectives. I think that part you can't avoid, to have both, because first you need to know how you're going to support whatever strategic business objectives the organization have for the different business lines, different business leaders, but also you can't avoid the how, the how you want to behave, how you want to care about your, again, I always say, care about your people, your clients, your partners, suppliers, etc. And it's a choice, but you need to make sure that you keep track of that when you deliver, technology-based solutions and AI. The third one, we also mentioned it briefly already, is that notion of iterative. So many times we've seen strategy where, like, the goal is to deliver something in 18 months from now because you have so many foundations to build and so on. And I get it in a way. You have foundations to build, but it's not going to cut it, because then, again, to your point, the reason why the CDO have such a short tenure is also because they spend all the time building enablers, and at the end they only build enablers, and then they move away and the new one comes, and then you still don't have the enablers done because you have a technology shift in between or whatever. So again, starting from the business is also a way to frame the program, saying how can we deliver things iteratively, pieces of it, grow awareness around that, and so on, and always mixing what can we deliver in the short term, but also building toward the long-term vision and long-term goals. So you have things that you can't achieve in a few months, and some you can, and you need a balance of those.
So are we talking about focusing on a specific line of business or a specific use case and proving the value there before going on to the next piece? Or?
Yeah, it's one way. It's to make sure that you choose things, and again, choose things either on one line of business or on that are short-term things you could achieve in the short term, because then you prove the value and you get more engagement, and then obviously you can get more budget because then you get more people willing to fund that. But I also insist sometimes about having the long-term thinking in the back end, because you still, everyone knows you need to build those long-term capabilities because it's about acceleration at the end and about scaling and so on. So focusing on delivering first successes should not obstruct the fact that you also need to build something for the future. So it's a bit about having both in mind is really important.
Makes sense.
So it's iterating towards those larger goals. Third thing, which is which is a key, is that notion of operationalize. So that might seem obvious, but the first failure of data and AI projects are not being used. Like you build something and no one uses it, and there is many challenges about how do you move from POC to production, how do you make sure people use it, and so that has to be part of the strategy. It's not something that can be an afterthought, and unfortunately, it's sometimes an afterthought where you build something and then you work on what would be the adoption plan. You need to have that as part of how we're going to proceed with that. So meaning, how do we engage business users from the very beginning? How do we work with them on what does it mean to have that adopted? What does it mean in terms of changing business processes and so on? So again, that's not a detail in the strategy. It's really a key thing to be built on. How do you build something that is going to be embedded within business processes and adopted by users, and really again, either it's a technical change, a change management change, a combination of that, but it has to be part of the plan from the very beginning, even for a POC. I mean, if you don't know some of those for the POC, it's probably going to fail.
I think we've all seen situations where CDOs have come in to deliver change, and they haven't got the support of the CIO or the COO necessarily, and they're going off being entrepreneurial, doing their kind of skunk work projects. They get technologies in, they start these projects, but unless they're fully operationalized by the organization, they're just too easy to kill off, and so you kind of get the stop-start thing.
Yeah, at the end, that's one of my I think it's Boyan called that the pilotitis. Where you have so many AI pilots everywhere or things you've built, and then but it's very much having just a research lab mindset. You build cool things, you're very proud of it, but then it's not going to have an impact, and that's a
science projects.
Yeah. So. And again, all of that is linked. So obviously, the fifth one is that notion of product mindset. So that's an important one, because product means two things: is that you need to build things that are build user-centric. So it's not feature-centric; it's user-centric, for whom you build it, and so on. But the other dimension with a product-based approach is that it's not a one-time exercise. It's not just something you build and then you push and it's done. You have that notion of ongoing management, ongoing nurturing, ongoing monitoring. And again, that has to be part of the strategy, and also of the funding strategy, because that raises question not only about which one you build, but also which one you kill if they don't deliver value, or which one you improve, or which one you merge, etc., etc. So that notion of making sure you build products and those products get adopted and those products evolve and grow or get divested is also a strong one. And again, it's not like you can't have just a list of projects, because you miss this big part of how you make that alive over time. And the last one I'm going to, and again, we discussed, but it's like, again, it might seem obvious, but it's very linked to the rest, is that the strategy needs to be evolutive. And again, the other characteristic we've seen are key to make it evolutive, because if it's iterative, then you have better ways, to stop things, reshuffle. Same if you have your products, because then you have some monitoring and you can say, okay, how can we maybe stop investment on that one, or reinvest somewhere else? And you have all those decisions. So you need to have the frameworks to make those decisions, and then be able to have an evolutive strategy. And all of those pieces, if you miss any of those 6 pieces, you probably have a weakness in the strategy. I'm not saying you're going to fail, but it means you have weaknesses, and those weaknesses can hurt badly at some point. So So I guess the main question afterwards is more, okay, now we've said that its question is sometimes, so what? How do we make it happen in a way? So what we recommend usually for that is to say, okay, you need ways to define the strategy, you need ways to deploy it, and you need to scale it. Initially you might have something very, as you said, opportunistic, or working with one business line, or starting with maybe not so ambitious. And so the question is, how do you build also an operating model for a strategy, an operating model to deliver the strategy? So that's what we call the kind of the strat-ops approach, where you need, like you do for DevOps or for DataOps and so on, you need a way to have that frequent interactions between what you want to achieve, how you deliver it, how you inform back what you're doing. What you do is informing back the strategy so that it can evolve, and then again you have that kind of virtuous loop. Sometimes people use the analogy of the OODA loop, from the US military, where basically it was observe, orient, decide, and act, and then you can loop on that. So that's coming from the US Air Force, where basically it's a simple way to say what is the learning cycle of pilots. You observe what's happening, you orient your decision, you decide based on that orientation, and then you act. And of course, once you've done the action, you have a new situation and you can continue to loop. So building those feedback loops is really important. And so again, you need that way to have this executable strategy with small increments. You need to have it measurable, so that's important. How do you get those measurement of what's happening to inform and have those feedback loops?
Do you need a kind of a clear operating model to be able to execute this?
Yeah, you need something. You need something. So you need to, and that's what I very high level describe here. We need frameworks basically, and those frameworks are okay. What are the frameworks to define my strategy and to make sure that it's, again, in that scaling mindset? How do I make sure that I build something across the organization that is fairly consistent and fairly a good basis to decide, observe, orient, and then act. And you need the same on the delivery level, like, how do you identify what you need to work on? How do you make sure that you have the right delivery processes and team topologies in place? And of course, that product management discipline and practices to deliver on all of that. And of course, you also need to frame the change management. I mentioned change management already. That's really important because change management is really part of what needs to be done around all the things you identify to make it happen, basically. Yeah.
I think if you think about the concept around failing fast, I mean, how important is it that a CDO kind of measures the initiatives that they cancel or that they deprioritize? Because I think if you're not deprioritizing, it begs the question whether you've got the right governance over the initiative, right? So
yeah, it's exactly. It's not only about deciding to invest on new stuff, but also to kill things. Because what is really important, and I know that many CDOs I've been talking with have that made the point very strongly, that you need space to experiment, you need space to test things, and that's fair. It's not just just don't invest just on the things you're sure you're going to be able to deliver. But the counterpart of that is that you need to be able to have that fail fast decision. Should I continue? Should I stop? Should I pivot? Should I give us another experiment with a new hypothesis? And all that process is a way to show that, yes, you use some of the budget to make some bets, but you master the way you spend that, and it's not like uncontrolled spendings. And again, it's about avoiding to pile up too many things. One of the I've seen. I say a few months ago, I was discussing with a CDO who joined the organization a few months before, and he said that they had 20,000 dashboards in their Cognos or whatever tool, and but over 6 months he did some survey, and 80% of the demands he was receiving for new dashboards actually were corresponding to dashboards that one already exists. So
Yeah.
so people didn't know, but second, that no one used. So
Right.
so he was estimating like that at least 80 to 90% of whatever was in there was useless and unused, which raised many questions about the cost of maintaining that, the cost of data processing, but also the cost of all those people in the organization who make decisions based on who know what data. So you can complain on data quality issue, but here the main problem is not even data quality, it's just that people don't even use where you've invested in there. So that's a big change. So what we can do is to zoom a bit, in some of those aspects. I don't think we have time to go through all of them, but because that's again part of what we discussed earlier. If you want to start simple and build your value story, you need to have the first things, and anyone interested, we can have dive more into the rest of it afterwards. So I think the first thing is that notion of outcome assessment. Outcome assessment is really how do you link or decide what are the use case and how they're connected with the organization goals and organization strategy. So based on the literature, there's plenty of books and methodologies around that. They're all both similar and slightly different. You have different flavors of this, but the principles remain fairly similar from my standpoint. So basically, you can either look at it as a value tree, how you link value from use case up to goals, and there is a slightly different way, which is decision tree, very much linked to the decision intelligence community. How do you identify the decision to be made? So here, I'm going to go quickly. I just picked 4. Basically, where you see coming from different books or organization, like Edge, which is a book from Southworks. On the right, there is the Economics of Data Analytics and Digital Transformation from Bill Schmarzo from the US. You have the Gartner frameworks, or APQC, which is a US organization on process optimization, basically the business process optimization. So, and you see that every time you move from here, what is the company vision, what are the goals that have been set, what is the bets you want to make to enable those goals, and then what are the use cases you can identify to support that. So that's an easy way to do it. In the Gartner frameworks, EV, which like enterprise value equation, you start from who are the stakeholders in your organization, what are their business priorities. So that's a good way also to ask questions internally. So you go to the stakeholders and say, what are your business priorities, and what are the outcomes you want to achieve in that context, and then what could we do? So what they call value enablers are really use cases to help you achieve those outcomes. So then it's a good way to have those conversations.
And so do you have a preference around these options?
I really don't, because I believe that there is no good or bad choice here. It's really about looking how the organization is thinking about those things already, and adopting the one that is the most near from that. So because you bring some structure on an existing, let's say, culture, and I believe that's where you need to have some kind of understanding of what are the different approaches, and finding the one you want, or blend. You can blend some of them. Again, there. So that's usually what we do with our clients, is to make sure that we work with them on building the right framework based on that, or also sometimes with partners, because our partners can come with their own frameworks and their own let's say flavor of those outcome assessment frameworks. So that's the first part of the why. Why do we want to do things?
We talked about some of these tactics on how to kind of approach this. Previously, you talked about risk, governance, and ethical responsibility, which is, I guess, is the other side of the coin. It's not just about value and making money and all those things. It's how do you conversely see the other side of the coin on that? So, love to hear what your thinking is on the approach.
That's an important point, because for me, at the very top, you have those two questions, which are what do you want to achieve and how do you want to achieve that? And you have different reasons to care about risk and guidelines. One is because you have your own organization goals, again, how you want to behave. And obviously you have regulations. So depending on your industry, you have different regulations, especially if you're in banking, insurance, pharma, you have a lot of regulations already that you need to comply with. But on top of that, you have also ethical things that are your own goals in terms of how you want to be against the environment, against again, if you do things for people or clients and so on. So first thing to do is to think about those goals and regulations and have again defining the right frame to do that. So here I put 5, but it's not necessarily exhaustive, just a way to show those different categories. Then once for each of them, you need to define this kind of how you're going to assess those risks and determine guidelines based on that. So assessment is to know how is that use case being to impact those risks and how bad is it if it happens. And the guidelines are critical because the guidelines is, but then what does it mean for my data and AI project? What does it mean for my data quality or data protection, etc.? What does it mean for my AI model? So it's basically a way to identify requirements for engineering afterwards to build that, saying, okay, now when you're going to care about the data, these are the aspects that we need to care about. And those controls, guidelines are going to be important because they are monitoring points afterwards. So basically you start from the top, what you want to achieve, and then you have the strong guidelines for the delivery teams. Again, here, there's plenty of existing frameworks from different organizations. For example, if you already are a DCAM organization, then it's probably a good one. We have new things coming in with Positive AI or Label IA in France, which are around the AI Act coming, which is a slightly different guidelines. Obviously, you have GDPR guidelines, etc. So the goal here is not to reinvent the wheel, but to use either what you have internally already, because you have risk frameworks already, so maybe extend them or reuse them, but to make sure that it's not only what we see often is that it's only a reporting exercise, so just doing the assessment and not enough the transposition to guidelines and how is that actually building requirements for your implementation.
I have to highlight DCAM because I love the guys at EDM Council. I think they do such an amazing job. So I'm a little bit biased there through my personal friendship. So they've done phenomenally well.
Yeah, and DCAM is fine, and I know there is a lot of work also to extend, because DCAM is only on the data part. That's why I'm mentioning other things, because when you think about data and AI and the architecture, you need somehow broader thing. But I know that the EDM Council is working on how to merge DCAM with CDMC, because then you have both data and architecture, but also how does it apply to AI and having something a bit more holistic. So that's a very interesting work going on there. And again, those are really important, because the stories about things AI gone wrong or data gone wrong are everywhere. So I think the last one I saw that we were discussing the other day is the DPD story with a new AI chatbot, where basically the chatbot is enabled to answer any question from a typical client, but also starting to be rude and to have negative statement about the company itself. So that's really the kind of bad buzz you want to avoid. So I would say no hurt to people in that case, but really bad in terms of image, and that's kind of one of the risks you want to avoid today, is to be in the news but for the wrong reasons. And again, that's the lowest impactful risk, because if you start to misbehaving, it can go a lot worse. But that kind of example of things you really want to avoid.
It's funny being a buffer between the CEO that says, let's put Gen AI everywhere tomorrow versus, having the right building blocks to protect the organization. I think there's an education that needs to happen at the board level. It's a tough one.
It's a tough one, but again, it's key to talk about both risk and outcomes at the same time, because if you only communicate risk, then you create, and I've seen that in a few organizations where then there's kind of a ban on AI, or saying we're not going to do anything, it's not for us, we're not ready, which is wrong, because you lose a lot of opportunities. And the other one, which is saying let's do it and we'll see, can be very damaging, especially with regulations, because you can get hurt. So I think it's great to find that balance, because then the actual requirements that you need to put in place are very different. Again, I take the example, if you're doing something which is about improving your inventory forecast, your risk management is very different than if you're doing something that is trying to decide how to optimize your workforce. I don't know, because it's very different. On one hand, if you do a mistake, maybe it's not so bad and you can fix that. On the other hand, you're going to touch people, so that's you can't put that on the same scale, and you need to be way more careful as the moment you talk about people or huge financial stakes, etc., etc. So the third point I wanted to talk about here, based on that, is that notion of portfolio management, because and again, we could detail a lot of things here, but back to the very first thing I discussed, the notion of building a portfolio is a key way to consolidate, animate, scale all those frameworks. Otherwise, it's really difficult. If you just have a bunch of Excel files and so on, it's really, really difficult to build that view and be able to take decisions and action. Prioritizing things, tracking things over time, and so on. So the portfolio is really like a financial portfolio for me. The structure of all of that, where you get your investments opportunities, you prioritize them, you nurture them, you develop them, you divest them sometimes, and then you go into that virtuous loop. So you need that portfolio thinking. And what we insist on is saying that for a data and AI portfolio, you need to build that kind of value lineage, where you have that link from those outcomes and strategic business priorities to the use cases, and then to the individual products, data products, AI products, etc. And I said that you have, or that you need to that you're going to use, or that you're going to build to enable those use cases. So that's the foundation of it, which is a critical part. And again, to gradually do that at scale across the organization, because then you can identify reuse opportunities or synergies, and that's what in the book from Bill Schmarz, or in the economics books, it called about the economies of scale in data. The more you reuse something, then you have the cost remains basically the same, but the value can be exponential. So that's a really important one, to be able to have that reuse opportunity. And the second thing, that so once you have that core, which is a portfolio, you can add on top those different frameworks we've been talking about, the value framework, the risk framework, the cost tracking frameworks, and make sure that you have them along the way. And the other part is the portfolio is also the structure to animate your different workflows, meaning how do you manage your different products lifecycle? How do you support the different committees? So committees in terms of the gates, the review boards, the finance committees, and so on, to decide investments, to do quarterly business reviews, etc., etc., and of course to report on different compliance reporting.
So it sounds like it requires quite a lot of investment in time for the leadership to not only kick this off, but also to operationalize it and do the continuous improvement and monitoring of progress. So I guess stakeholder management. What are you seeing in terms of the key stakeholders? Are they doing this well? Is it still a learning exercise?
Yeah, it's very different from one organization to the next one. I think too few organizations have that portfolio approach for now. So, and when they have one, it's a very IT-centric one. So a portfolio of project delivery, but not a portfolio of building that kind of data and AI patrimony and transformation and so on. So that's a weakness. But then when with our clients, what we see is that we manage to have way more stakeholders engaged around the portfolio than before. So that means we can really have finance, obviously business leaders, risk management people, the data office. So making that bridge between the technical and non-technical people is really the goal also of the portfolio. And that's important because and you know that well, all the tech tools on the market pretend to be a kind of the link between business and IT, but it's true only for the business practitioners. So but if you take a business leader, he's not going to go into your data management tool to understand things. It's at a level of detail which is way too low for him to understand the goal. So you need to have that story, which is okay. What are we doing that is going to enable your goals, and then help the other part of the team to make the rest of the journey back to okay, and how does it connect to what we're actually doing? So it's really about communication both ways, helping the tech team to inform the business leaders what they're doing for them, but also helping the business leaders to communicate the requirements down to the people doing it, so that they know why are we doing that in the first place, and how we're going to measure success.
Makes sense. This is all very helpful methodologies here, and highlighting a lot of these key components that we need to consider moving forward. What I'd like to do is maybe ask you to kind of bring to life, how does UE help bridge the gap between data and business? So maybe we could just have a quick look at that to take the opportunity to market UE.
Yeah, so very briefly, so UE is pretty unique, and we are really helping organizations build their value-driven data analytics, data and AI portfolio. So most of what we've been talking about before, and building that, sometimes the cockpit of the data and AI transformation, the cockpit of the data office, so depending on how you want to frame that. And the goal is really to animate that end-to-end process, from capturing demands, prioritizing them, collaborating with a lot of different stakeholders around prioritization, managing your data and AI products, and they're spreading all the product management mindset, and we also have a very deep ability to connect with existing technical tools, which is important because if organizations have a data catalog, if organizations have an operational project management tool, like most organizations, they use Jira or Azure DevOps Node, and maybe it's different, but and it's important to connect them to automate things. Saying if you have an inventory of data, then it's really important to inform the portfolio, but also to use the portfolio to inform better, how you prioritize and why you need to emphasize the work of the data governance teams and so on. So one thing I wanted to highlight is that so it's a quick video of UE where you see a visual view of the portfolio, and basically what you see here is really from the right to left, the strategic business priority, what are the supporting business metrics that we've identified, what are the use case, and how it's linking down to data. So that really that business lineage I've been talking about. And you see that we can highlight things saying, okay, if I want to look at growth of customer base, I can have that lineage back from what are the metrics, what are the use case, and down to the individual data. And even looking here at the data quality score, for example, for the customer profile data, then you have a way better story to tell about, okay, we see that the quality score is actually pretty low. So how better could it be if we actually invest on improving that? Maybe it would have a huge impact on increased value for that use case, on huge impact on those metrics, and so on. So again, we have that ability to work both ways, to say, because we have that lineage, and that lineage is very complementary to the more technical lineage you find in other tools. And again, so you can navigate in the portfolio in all those different dimensions. and yeah. So if anyone is interested, then of course around that we plug all those different frameworks in terms, of how to do assessment, how to do prioritization, how to do tracking, and so on. I'm happy to show that afterwards.
So, Nicola, is this something that the data leaders can use to illustrate how they're contributing to the business? So, if the CEO asks them, "What are you working on? What are you doing with all the investment that I put in last year?"
Yes, that's one of the way. I mean, we have different ways to articulate that, but that's one of the very visual way. Where you can have, again, walk the path from the business leaders on the right, saying, okay, this is what we're working on. This is how we are working for you. And this is what it means. So again, linking that use case we're working on, that's the progress, and this is the impact that you're expecting, or this is what we have delivered, and this is the impact you have measured. And again, on the other hand, it's also critical for me to be able to tell to the practitioners why and what's the impact of what you're doing, because then it's also a way to promote what they're doing, or to help them align on making it as efficiently as possible.
So for CDOs who are now building their business case or budgets for next year, this could be quite a useful tool to be able to illustrate the progress that they're making, how they're aligning to the business, and to give confidence to the CEO that he's going to get an ROI.
Yeah, exactly. So that's and again, that's just one of the views we have, but it's a very visual way of looking at the high level portfolio and supporting all those decisions, reviews, and again getting budget. That's the whole point of the first talk today.
Great. Thank you, Nicolas. I'm just doing a quick time check. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. So please feel free to make any comments, ask any questions, either in the chat below or directly via LinkedIn. Some key takeaways for me, I think, were obviously the importance of aligning all your data and AI strategies to something that is meaningful for the business, rather than just a technical exercise. The second thing is around starting small and then iterating over time. So get some quick wins rather than waiting a year and a half or so before you can deliver tangible value. And that's all about the optics on it. So it's about confidence, it's about further investment. And the final key takeaway is about the importance of doing continuous monitoring. So by operationalizing this, it's not a build it and forget it. It's a continuously monitoring, start to deprioritize when necessary, but kind of do that in a close to real time as possible. Really useful. Thank you, Nicolas. We have another minute or so for any additional questions.
Yeah. In any case, if you're interested to dig further in some of those questions, or have a in-depth demo, feel free to reach out to Rob or myself.
Okay, so demos, surveys, questions, anything related to value management, please do get in touch.
Awesome.
Great. I think we'll call it a wrap. Thanks everyone for attending. Have an amazing Thursday, and we hope you join the next webinar.
Yeah, thank you very much.